Times Square is a tremendous melody of lights all over the place. Now, when I was a kid, I remember there were neons all over the place, but they've been replaced through the years by moving screens, gigantic screens where the pictures are just like giant televisions. But there are still a few neons laying around, like a little open sign in a window and things like that. I'm going to zoom in on one such neon, which, strangely enough, a very small part of it is visible because after I started placing people, I decided to put Thomas Knoll here, and he hid the rest of the neon sign, and all we see is the little R right there, little piece of a neon. But we're going to go in here and create an entire neon sign. Now, that original neon sign looked like this. There's the original neon sign. So all you're seeing now is this little R. Now look at this neon, and you'll see that it's a lot like real neons. A neon tube is one continuous tube, and the areas where they're connected or overlapping, those areas are usually painted black to hide the light going through that area, so all you see is the actual letter lit up. So now we're going to go in there and create our own neon. So it is, like I said, one continuous tube. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little neon for the word art. Now, you can go in there and get real tricky and smart and create your own letters, but sometimes it's a lot easier to just give yourself a guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first type in art. I'm going to select it, make sure it's something I can see it, like a black. There it is. And I want a font that's just a nice, simple font. So I'm going to go with this Helvetica Neue, and let's see if we got something really light there. We do. We have a light. That's a good size because I'm going to enlarge it now this way. I'm going to go in here and transform it this way. I'm going to scale it up and bring it out just like that. Now, this is my area of the letters that I'm going to use to trace. Because now with my pen tool, I'm going to go in there and create these letters. Now remember that this is a bent tube of glass. So it does have a way of going in there and having these curled edges and such. So right here, I'm going to have this little piece that's just sticking out and coming in and curving up. This is the area where it's connected to the sign. Then right here, it's going to start to go up. So I'm going to just draw a little line straight up over to here, and there it curls around this top, and I'm going along the centers of the letters, if you'll notice. And I'm going to come down here, and here it's going to curve into this little area here and come into the R, which is going to go up here, straight up, curl around this little edge, and it helps to master this tool. I'm just going to move these guys over just a little so I have more of a curve there. I'm going to come straight across this way, go to the edge here, around that curve, come around here and around this curve, and then come right over to here. And here I'm going to kind of double back on itself, right under there like that. And come straight out here and curve around here. Come down. And here's this little curve that's going to connect to the T. Bring it out. And then there's that little curve going up to the top where it's going to now curve on itself, come over here, double back on itself, and finish off the letter here. And then here is going to curve out just a little and connect to the sign in back. So now I'm going to go back here and just kind of really clean this up a bit so I have some nice smooth lines. Let's bring this guy out just a little bit more, and I want this to be a smoother curve here. So I'm just going to give this guy a little twist here just to give it more of a curve like that. And right up here, we're just kind of smoothing this out a little. So I'm just kind of finessing my paths. And then right here, we're going to create a whole nother little path with my pen tool. I'm just going to go in here and just create a little, it's connecting to that last path. Let's turn off the path. And it's just going to go in here, a little curl, just like that, going straight across, and a little curl like that. Now this is where it's going to connect into the sign. We'll do that part last. So now let's just keep looking at our paths, make sure they're all nice and smooth, and so on. And I like this one to be a little straighter, so I'm just going to select those 2 points, and holding down my cursor keys, I'm going to just click down until I have a nice straight line across. That's looking good. This guy could use a little more of a curve to it, so let's just soften that up a little. That's looking good. Everybody's in place, and that's great. So now, let's pull back so we see the whole thing. At this point, we don't need to see the letters anymore, so we'll turn that one off. Take our path and save it. So I'm going to take my background and I'm going to invert it to black. So there it is. And then, layer on top of this, I'm going to call it tube. And I'm going to take that path that I created, and I'm going to get a brush. I want the brush to be a hard edge. So I'm going to bring the hardness up to 100%, and the size, let's bring it down to something that's about the size of the tube that we want, which is maybe a little smaller. Let's go down to about a 25. That's a good size. And we could test it right there just to see. That's good. So now I'm going to get a color for my sign to be. And we want it to be a nice bright red neon. So I'm going to go in there and pick a nice bright red. Like, let's say that red right there. Click OK. So I got this nice bright red color right there. And we could test it again. There it is. Now the opacity is brought down. So let's bring this up to 100%. And there, now we can see how nice and rich it is. I'm going to make sure that my brush is a solid brush. So I'm going to go in here, bring the spacing down to 1%, which is the smallest. So I have a nice solid line. So now that I have that, I'm going to stroke that path. Now I have multiple paths going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this path separate from the other one. So I'm going to go in here and give this a nice little stroke. And I didn't select the brush. I'm in the brush. Stroke it. And there we have that. So that's the tube. Now I'm going to put another layer right here. I'm going to put it behind the tube. I'm going to call this crossbar. That's this little guy right here, because he's separate. Now that I see him and we see how he's overlapping, I'm going to bring this part in just a little bit. I'm going to grab these 2 points and bring them in just a little, and grab these two and bring them in just a little. And there we have that guy selected. In crossbar, I'm going to say, with the brush, stroke it. So there, now we have all our basic lines that we need, right? So now I want to give this a little bit of a glow, just a little tiny glow in the center. So I'm going to get a yellow. I'm going to get a nice bright yellow. I'm going to get my paintbrush. I'm going to soften it, and I'll make it much smaller. So I have a really small little brush right in there, which I'm going to go in a layer on top of all this. Right on top here, I'm going to call it electricity. So it's just like a little charge going through there, and we could test it out to see what it's going to look like. All right, so that's good. Let's make it a little smaller. And we're going to take the paths, all of them, and stroke them with that brush. So I go in there and stroke it. So now I'm going to blur this part. I want to get it really nice and soft. Give it a Gaussian blur and soften that up about like that. That's looking good. Nice and soft. So now we're starting to get our little neon going there. So now, got to give it a little glow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tube layer right here and double click on it and say, give it a little outer glow. And I'm going to spread it out a little bit. And we're going to pick something a little more towards the reds, because we want to keep it in that same style. So just go in there and give it a nice red color like that. And we'll set this to normal. So we just get this nice even red up there, right through there. Click OK, and that looks good. And we'll duplicate that right onto the crossbar layer right there. So now we're getting all that. The final thing we're going to do here is right on top of the tubes, I'm going to create another layer, which we're going to call paint. This is the area where the tubes have been painted over. So I got black for my background. I'm going to take a gray for my foreground color, and I'm going to get a brush like this one here. I'm going to take this grunge brush here, the spatter brush, which I'm going to go in there and modify. Give it a little spacing, and go into my shape dynamics, turn this off, and set up a size jitter and an angle jitter, and a little color dynamics between foreground and background. Then in that layer, I'm going to go in here and set it 100%. Let's make it a smaller brush. I'm going to start to paint right in there like that. These are the areas where the letters are painted over so that you can only see the letters themselves. Right there, and finally right there. Now we're going to see more of this paint in another spot in a second. So now let's go up here real close, and we have this whole section right here. So I'm creating a selection right across here so that I can then paint right in here as well, because we're going to have to hide that part of the tube. And let's just deselect this part right here. Okay, so now I can paint right in there. The same thing with this bottom part of the R. So I want to go in here and just select this little bottom part right here of my R, right through there, which is where we're going to add this paint. This is the paint that's segregating those parts of the letter so we see only the part that we want to be seen. Just like that. All right. Now that we have that paint, let's pull back a little bit. We can go in there and clip that layer with the tubes. There it is. We've got the paint inside there. We're going to go to the electricity and we're going to give it a mask. And in the mask, we're going to paint out those areas where we have the paint. So I'm going to go in there and just get a regular brush. Everything's set up. Good. We're going to set this to a little below, and I'm going to just erase the electricity there, erase the electricity right through here. And let's make sure that brush has no weird settings. There we go. So I'm going to paint out that electricity right through there, and I'm going to paint out the electricity right in this area here, right there like that, and right in here, and right through this little bottom area. Let's just go in there and just make sure we have this little section selected, and we're going to erase that electricity right in there. We don't want to see it there, and we don't want to see it right through this area here. Let's just paint it out right in that area. And with a soft brush this time, we're just going to go in very lightly, soften that right through there. So there, now we're starting to get all this nice little painted areas of our tubes and so on. Now, we have to do one more thing here. We have to go to that layer right here and get the effects taken out of there. So we're going to say Layer, Style, Create Layer. And the reason for that is because this glow has to be eliminated from these areas. So I'm going to go in there and erase those. I'm just going to erase them at this point. So I get a nice big soft eraser. Make sure it's a soft edge. And I'm going to erase that area of the glow. So just get it right out of there and take it out of this area here. And we'll take it right from this here and from the ends of our neon. Right there, down here, and right in there. Just get rid of those little areas of the neon. Now, the final thing that we're going to need here is, what is this thing attached to? So we're going to create a little series of shapes here. We're going to create a little circle like this. And right on top of this, we're going to create a layer. And this will be the connector. And I'm going to fill that with that gray. That gray's fine. See, that's good. And we'll fill it with that gray. And then I'm going to contract that selection. I'm going to go in there and say, modify, contract. We'll contract it by, let's say, 8 pixels. Let's go in there and contract it some more. We'll contract it 9 more. Okay, there we go. And that we're going to fill with the black. So there's the connector of our little neon. So I'm going to give that a little layer style right here. Just give it a little bevel and emboss. Just so it's got a little light coming from somewhere. And we'll just set a little light coming from this direction, like that. Click OK. And I'm going to take that guy, I'm going to duplicate him. And then this duplicate, I'm going to drag over here and put him there. It could be a little bit outside of the scene, no problem. Okay, we'll go into its layer style. Go to the bevel and emboss, turn off the global light, and then have the light coming from this direction, like that. Then we can duplicate him again. And this last one, we'll just go in there and say, we'll put that one right here and duplicate it straight across there like that. So now we have all these little connectors for our neon. And the last thing we want to do is, what is it actually connected to? So I'm going to create this long sheet right here. And in the layer in back of everything, I'm going to create a layer right here. And we'll just call this the base. And I'm going to fill this with, we'll go with a nice gray like that. And I'm going to go in there and just fill that. There's this tone, right, which I'm going to bring down in opacity. So it's just this piece of plastic back there, which I can go in there and add all kinds of tones to give it some dimension. But what I am going to do is I am going to reflect this light onto it. Now, the first thing I need to do is I'm going to make my neons a selection. And I'm going to expand it a little bit. So I'll go in there and say expand. We'll expand it by, say, 15 pixels. And I'm going to pick up this red right here. And on top of the base, I'm going to go ahead and fill that with that color, which I'm then going to blur it considerably. Give it a real big blur, like so. Bring down the opacity a little bit, and there you can see that now we have these neon sign that's attached to a wall. It looks like it should.